Hello everyone and welcome to my little corner of the internet. My name's Michael and I'm bitten by a radioactive book. Today I want to bring you my January wrap up, and as I've read 11 books in January and read a total amount of, I don't know, 5,100 something pages, let's get right into it to keep that as short as possible. First off, I've read The Mechanical by Ian Tregillis, the first installment in his Alchemist saga. I really enjoyed this one, gave it 4 stars. The basic idea is that the Dutch invented some clockwork workers and clockwork soldiers in the, I don't know, 1600s and took over the world. And now the Dutch Calvinist empire, which is like a Protestant run empire, is all over the world, and the Catholics are like persecuted and only live in hiding or in a little enclave in the US in the Montagne Royale, the Rocky Mountains, and I think in Canada as well. We're following 3 characters. One is one of these clackers, which is one of the clockwork workers. There is a very interesting concept behind it. They get like imprinted, so they are like produced by the government, and they then get imprinted, and like the highest imprint is that they don't go up against the government at all, and then they are lent out in like 100-year contracts to families, and they work for those families, and then when they get like a command from one of the family members, they have like this urge to fulfill that command, and the longer it takes them, the more some screws are getting screwed tighter or something like that, and they hurt. So often they get like conflicting commands from various family members, and so that hurts them a lot. And of course, one of the basic ideas is that that one or more of them get like a conscience. They have like their own language where they communicate with each other. That's very interesting. The other 2 perspectives we have are one is like a priest who is disguising himself like as a Calvinist priest, but is like a kind of spy for the Catholics and is Catholic on his own. And then we get also the glimpse into the Catholic enclave in the US with their spy master. The book has some philosophical ideas, mainly by René Descartes, which are discussed there, and I personally really like Descartes' ideas, and so I enjoyed that a lot. And maybe for people who don't or who aren't that much into philosophy, it might be more of a 3.5 star read, because the philosophy aspects were what made me give this book the 4th star. Next up we have Prince of Wolves by Dave Gross. It's the first installment in the Pathfinder Tales kind of mosaic series. This is based on the role-playing game Pathfinder, and what those universes always do is that they have like multiple authors who write in that universe. Some of them revisit their characters, so you have like sub-series within the series, and this is actually the first book overall in the series. It features like 2 main characters, and the interesting thing here is one is like a pathfinder, an adventurer / investigator, and his assistant is the second point of view, and both point of views are told from first person, so you have always alternating chapters between them, and they get wrapped up in a country that has a bit of a gothic horror kind of feeling. Werewolves, vampires will play a role. So it's good old school fantasy, nothing special, and I rated it 3 stars. Next up we have The Elfstones of Shannara by Terry Brooks. That is a buddy read I've done with a couple of other booktubers. I think you saw some wrap-ups or reviews of this already and know that most of us had a hard time with the book. So did I. I only rated it 2 stars. It was the weakest of the 11 books I've read this month. The problem of it was mainly that it was very, very repetitive. There were like, things explained over and over again, and often a scene started with a character pondering about like some point of the plot, and we see his inner monologue where he explains everything that we need to know, and then other characters enter and then they talk about it, and the whole thing what was already told in the inner monologue is then again discussed at length, and sometimes even twice. And there are like at least 3 or 4 of that scenes in the build-up within the first 200 or 300 pages, and so in the first half you have the feeling it's once again and again and again the same thing. And that really drags the book down. I also want to say some positive things, because I don't tend to like totally bash books. I think what Terry Brooks does really well are battle scenes in here. The battle scenes had some good old school like action feeling. I really enjoyed that. What I also really liked is when Terry Brooks went into a kind of non-fiction, a tale kind of style when he talks about like the history of the world. I've read a lot of source material books for role-playing games, and these are basically like fictional, non-fictional books about imagined worlds, and that style works well for me. And I really enjoyed that. So when he did world building and did this in this kind of tale kind of style, I really enjoyed that. But overall, the book in itself, the characters were very flat and did some stupid things as well. So overall, it was not something I really enjoyed. I thought it was okay, and therefore I rated it 2 stars. Next up we have The Copper Promise by Jen Williams. This is a book that will speak to people who like Michael J. Sullivan's Riria Chronicles, or Sword and Sorcery. Overall, it's a light read, I think. It is actually a collection of connected novellas. So we have like 4 very distinct parts that talk about certain adventures. We follow Windrin, who is like a female thief, and she's like very very funny. I liked her dialogue a lot. Then we have, I think he's called Siegfried, who is like a knight, and he's more like calm, and he is a friend of hers. Then we have another character who's in their party, and then we have someone who hires them, a lord, and from those 4 points of view, this is mainly told. I think it was enjoyable, but once again, nothing really special that wowed me, so I ended up rating it 3 stars. Next up we have Black Wolves, the first installment in Kate Elliott's new trilogy, which is based upon her Crossroads world, and talks about what happens after like the first trilogy that she wrote in there. You can read it as a or without having read the Crossroads trilogy. It will of course spoil a little bit. I did that, so if you want to really like experiences, maybe start with the Crossroads trilogy there. It has like a distinct Asian feeling of the society, very, very interesting. We follow a plethora of characters. There's a lot of political intrigue. The first half is like a really build up, really a slow burner. I like that because it has like a lot of world building, a lot of these political setups as well, and I really enjoyed that. Maybe for more impatient readers that might be a bit too slow, so you might deduct one star from my rating. I rated it 4 stars, and it was one of the strongest books I've read this month. Next up we have The Covenant of the Forge, the first installment in Dan Parkinson's Dwarven Nations trilogy, which is set in the Dragonlance shared universe, so same as Pathfinder. We have this kind of shared universe in the Dragonlance world, and I love Dragonlance. I've read about 30, 40, 50 books in it, and I want to reread a lot of them this year and read some of those I haven't read so far. And I was craving some dwarves, and I have never read like the Dwarven Nations trilogy, and so as I'm always interested in what dwarves are doing, I wanted to do that. And once again, very good old school like fantasy, nothing special, but if you like it, very enjoyable, so I rated it 3 stars. Next up we have Unholy War by David Hare. It's the third installment in his Moontide Quartet. I think I've talked a lot about the series so far. Caitlin from KDG really loves the series, and we're reading it together. I personally thought that this book was the weakest of the 3. I still rated it like 4 stars, but it's definitely like the weakest for me. I think David Hare does some decisions that are too often like the same. He pairs up a lot of like romantic couples here that go together, and I had the feeling that some of their stories are like a bit repetitive. And that for me personally, there was way too much focus on like the character development, and especially like the development of the relationships between the characters. I know that a lot of people like to read this kind of things, but I had the feeling that the overall plot suffered a lot from that in this one, but still I rated it 4 stars, so that shows you how strong the series overall still is. Next up I read Homeland by R.A. Salvatore, the first installment in his huge Drizzt Do'Urden series, and they're the first in the first sub-series, the first Legend of Drizzt, I think it's called, it's the Dark Elf trilogy. And I really enjoyed that. Once again, it's old school fantasy in a shared world, the Forgotten Realms here, this time another Dungeons and Dragons source set. What I enjoyed here a lot was that we have a distinctive focus on the world of the Dark Elves. We see like the whole political setup and the whole world setup of Menzoberranzan, a world that is like, or a town that is underground and almost in darkness. We have just a bit of light from some mushrooms, and yeah, the feeling, the world building, the atmosphere was really, really great. Then Drizzt Do'Urden is a character that is born into a world that is very vicious and malicious, and is set upon like trying to destroy other like noble houses and go farther up the ladder, and to kill, to manipulate, and to lie. And Drizzt is a character who is like the opposite of all that his society stands for, and so he has to find a way to survive in that society and still like yeah, remain true to what he really believes in, and that is an interesting struggle. So overall I enjoyed it a lot and rated it 4 stars. Next up we have The Daylight War by Peter V. Brett. It's the third installment in his Demon Cycle saga. Once again, I think I talked about the series on my channel, and as it's the third installment, I don't want to say too much about the plot. Overall, it was enjoyable. I rated it 3 stars. It didn't wow me in any way. I had once again some structural issues that were not as bad as like in the second book, but still I I think there are some decisions he takes with his structure that I yeah, personally don't care for that much. So yeah, so we'll have to see. I'm going to read the fourth book this month, so I hope that he will remedy that a little bit and that it's going to pick up a little bit, because for an epic fantasy series, 4 stars, 3 stars, 3 stars is not as good as I expected it to be, so hopefully the series will pick up for me. Next up we have The Bands of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson. It's the third installment in his newer Mistborn series regarding Wax and Wayne, and the 7th book overall from the Mistborn world. You will see like a lot of very positive and enthusiastic reviews of the book. I have to say, you know that I'm more a Sanderson liker than a Sanderson lover. It was entertaining and enjoyable. I think it had a really good start with a lot of banter. It was almost humorous, had a Terry Pratchett kind of feeling. Like the first 4 or 5 chapters worked really well for me, but then it fell flat. I was not engaged in the plot overall. Yeah, there was character development, of course, but as you know, I'm not the biggest fan of reading character development if the plot and the world building doesn't fascinate me enough. I think there were like a lot of unnecessary action scenes that seemed to be in there just for the sake of, oh, that would be a good time to have an action scene in the book and stuff like that. So it wasn't per se like a bad book. It was still enjoyable. I rated it 3 stars, but overall it's too formulaic for me. Sanderson does a lot of the things he always does in the books, and if that works for you, then you will like that book as well. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. And last but not least, we have City of Blades by Robert Jackson Bennett. This was my favorite book of the month. I rated it 5 stars. It follows Commander Mulagesh, General Mulagesh. Why did I say Commander? And she's one of the characters that we already know from City of Stairs. She goes on to a new adventure. Actually, she was already in retirement, but then it came out that her pension technically would require her to do some more, a few months of service, and so she is sent to another town on a secret mission. I don't want to go too much into it, and of course we will have like a connection to the divine as well. The book, for quite a while I thought it would be more of a 4-star book than a 5-star book, because actually a lot of the structure that Robert Jackson Bennett uses in the first half of the book is kind of a copy blueprint of what he did in City of Stairs, so that felt very familiar and thus worked, of course, but I was a little bit, he's doing a lot of the same and staying in some very comfortable elements. But towards the end, the book got more exciting. I think the ending was a little bit better even than it was in City of Stairs. And yeah, I really like the ideas. The writing itself is really good. The characters are great, and so overall it was like the best read of the month and a 5-star. So wow, that is an awfully long video, so without further ado, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button. If you want to see more of me, subscribe to my channel, and until next time, I hope you get bitten by a really good book too. Bye!